Okay, welcome to the .NET Engineering Forum for May. We're going to be presenting different sessions at the Microsoft Build Conference that several of us attended. We're going to start with a little video that Tony Spencer put together. I don't have any announcements. The only announcement I can think of is that there is going to be a .NET Core advanced training in the next month or so, and so look for that to come out. We'll announce that when we're ready to present that. Let's go ahead and start the video. Okay, hi. Welcome to Build Conference. We're going to the registration upstairs, and everybody's ready. Let's go. That guy's driving my car. So up here we can see the convention center has a green skylit light.
I'm always happy, I just don't look at it.
Welcome to Build 2019. It's fantastic to see you all in Seattle.
My name's Jim. Rich. The seating was bad for the keynote.
They've adopted a new strategy. I think they're trying to have more exhibits and more displays and less seating.
If you look behind me here, this is the 200-foot by 50-foot LED display. The cool thing about it is you can use this little doohickey here and tune in to any of the breakout sections all at the same time. Just one extra way to get more info into your brain.
Come on, Bones, what's the mystery? His brain is gone.
Hey, we're at Build 20, what year is this, 2019? We're at Build 2019 and we're at the Windows Insider booth.
No, I'm not a celebrity at all. Hi everyone, how are you? Donna Sarkar, Chief Ninja Cat.
What we're going to find out today is what? How long
Tony's
we've been an insider.
I already know.
You do? Well, let's find out.
You have to scan your badge and it'll tell you.
Oh yeah, okay. How long you've been an insider, Okay. What does it say?
Day oneer.
Day oneer.
Have another day oneer.
There you go. Good job.
Day oneer.
Style. I know how to run wild. Taking over the spotlight. I'm on a roll, ready for the show now. It's go time. Watch what I do. Watch what I do. I see you looking. Watch what I do. Oh my. Oh my. Watch what I do.
Hello, everybody. Who am I saying hi to?
I don't know. My wife.
Oh, really?
What are you working on these days?
Still TypeScript.
TypeScript.
Yeah.
Say hi to everybody.
Hey, how you doing?
We got John Galloway.
Yep.
And,
Hi, Beth Massey.
These are all famous people.
We're extending the cloud to the edge.
Yeah, so accessibility insights for web you can get from the Chrome like the Chrome store, and for the Edge version you can get it from the Edge store. And if you forget where you can get it, you can just go to accessibilityinsights.io.
We're here at Sneak Peeks. We're getting prepared for the XAML Islands future with WinUI. Stay tuned right after this.
With Miguel. Okay, so my question to you is, why did you remove tooling for Windows Phone in Visual Studio 2019?
Oh no! Well,
Of course. A child could do it.
Look at all those delicious vegetables.
Vegetables?
Look at them. Look at the tomatoes. Look at those giant ones. I gotta get.
But it cut.
Thank you, Tony. All right. Where's my slides? Okay, let's get started. So the agenda for today's meeting is written on the whiteboard. So if you're one of the presenters who's going to come up, this is kind of the order that we'll go in. So kind of find your name on the list. I think everybody's here. See Sean, Dennis, okay. Majority of the people are here. I'm going to talk about one of the sessions at Build 2019 that was held in Seattle by Microsoft. We had a lot of interesting information, and if you ever went out to the Build site, you could see that there are several keynotes, there's a ton of breakout sessions, and you might be wondering, how do I get through all 400 and 500 of these breakout sessions that are recorded that Microsoft's made available for me? What do I need to focus in on? So we're going to just give you about 8 or 10 sessions today that might spark your interest. If you're interested on any of the sessions that we talk about today, make sure you go out to the Build site and watch the recording. Here's some on the topic of MS Teams, which is a development platform. Microsoft is making it open and available for all of you to be able to write applications or things, especially that you need within the corporation, to be able to add into the Teams platform, and you can run apps and do a lot of things within the Teams environment. So I'm going to talk specifically about bots and what I've been working on to try and come up with a .NET Stack Teams channel bot, so that if you have questions for the .NET Stack team, you go out to Teams, you ask a question, our bot will engage and answer any questions that you might have that it knows about. And it will get smarter over time. We'll add more stuff from our frequently asked questions list to that bot, so it should get better and better over time, so that it can free up time for the rest of us on the .NET Stack team to do other important things. If you're interested in this, we can help you get through this process. Okay, so these are the sessions. It has the ID. You can go look it up on the Build site. I'm going to recommend this first one on the list that was a lot of code. So if you're interested in coding, that would be the one I would recommend. The things I'm going to talk about a little bit today in this session is Microsoft Teams. Obviously, there's a thing called App Studio within Teams to help you build and register your app. We're going to talk about Q&A Maker for making your bot, which will create a knowledge base that it will read from, the bot framework in Azure, and then other Azure App Services available for helping and getting this running. So in Q&A Maker, you go to qnamaker.ai. It will walk you through step by step the things that you need to do. First thing you do is create a knowledge base, and you can make a knowledge base. You can populate it with, if you have a website that has a frequently asked questions page, you just send the URL and it will go read that whole page, bring it into a database in a question answer format for your bot to use. If you want to create it yourself and just in a Word document or a text file, just put in a question and then several answers or whatever you want to put in there for what your bot will know about, then you can feed that into the Q&A Maker. So there's a couple steps, really simple. Create a Q&A Maker, you connect a service to that, you name your knowledge base, you have populate it, and then you click the create button. Pretty simple. You make any changes to it over time as you get things, the bot will tell you what questions it received that it couldn't answer. And so you can then add those to your knowledge base, and then you retrain your bot, and it will get smarter over time. And that's human intervention. There's other ways to do it where through machine learning that it will get smarter on its own without your intervention. So let me just break out real quick to my Q&A Maker, maybe. Okay, so here's my knowledge base. I have over on the left-hand side some questions that I've entered in. Things like, how do I get a Visual Studio license? How much does a Visual Studio license cost? Who's on the .NET Stack team, and so forth. And then the answers are over here on the right-hand side. And so you can make that as extensive as you want. If you make any changes, there's a Save and Train button. If we want to do a little testing here, we can kind of just say something like, who is on the .NET? Wow, cannot type. Okay, so there are the members of the .NET Stack team. You can ask any question you want to the bot, and it will handle what it knows about. It'll also get some of your inferences. So if you type something a little different than that, not exactly, but close enough, it will be able to determine what your intent is and be able to give you a response. Okay, so that's just getting a bot in Azure with a knowledge base that it can connect to, or getting the knowledge base in Q&A Maker. So in Azure, then you go into Bot Services. And from the last step on the Q&A Maker, it will also say, you have a button, say Create a Bot. It will take you into Azure. Go into Bot Services, create a web app bot. You do the same kinds of things. You tell it what name you're going to call it, the subscription, what account it'll be under. And then there's a free tier. So if you just want to have something out there, it may not be super fast. It may not scale to millions of users all at the same time. But if you want to go in the free tier, you can play around with it. It doesn't cost you anything. And then last, you need an app ID. So the app ID, to get it working in our corporate teams here at the church, you will need to get permissions. None of us have permissions to be able to register an app in the corporate Microsoft Teams. So Ryan Marchant is the person that you would go talk to. He will register an application and give you back an app ID and an app secret, and then you'll use that in your configuration of your bot.
We should all wait for the same day. Everybody wait and do it all on the same day.
Yeah, we'll waste his whole day. Okay, so in Teams then, you go into Teams and use App Studio to create a new Teams app. Okay, and again, you have rights to be able to do this, but you won't have rights to be able to make it available to everybody unless you have that ID and that secret. So you go into the Manifest Editor tab and you generate a manifest file for your app and for your bot. You create an app with a registered ID, contact Ryan Marchant, create a new bot, or use an existing one. So if you just want to create it all within Teams, you can. You don't have to go out to Azure and deploy your bot in the cloud. You can create it within Teams, and then you could, where it says optional, you can actually create what the menu is going to look like, what your bot can handle, all within Teams. So you never have to do any of those last things I was just telling you all about with Q&A Maker. But you probably want it to be a little smarter than what Teams allows you. The bot editor in Teams is pretty limited. And then for security purposes, you want to define what domain. You just want churchjesuschrist.org, or maybe ldschurch.org, lds.org, to be able to access your app. Okay, now I do say at the bottom here, don't submit it, because if you do submit it, it will make it available worldwide. Now, if that's what you were going for, and you want to have this awesome bot that's used worldwide and register with Microsoft, you can submit it, and if you have rights to be able to do that, you can. But for our purposes, if you want it just for your Teams channel in Teams, then you probably don't want to submit it broadly. Okay, I'm going to skip the demo because I already just showed you a little bit of testing, and it's actually not quite working yet. So we're just going to move on to the next presenter. But the next steps that I can do with this bot that I'm planning to do is incorporate more of the LUIS, the language understanding service, and be able to have more utterances, more intents, and be able to work with real general questions that people can ask about anything about the church or about working at the church. Question?
So do you think this bot service is up to the task of replacing like our knowledge bases for the GSC?
It's capable of doing that. We would probably want it to be not on the free tier. We would want it to pay for something to get it so that the performance is there and the scalability is there. But it definitely could replace a lot of what people are doing in support today. We would probably still have one or two people on the phones just in case the bot doesn't handle it. You still need a fallback until we make the bot smart enough that it can handle pretty much everything. But yeah, I could definitely see the support and online stuff that people are doing totally automated through this. So that's great. Again, we can support a lot of other things that Cognitive Services makes available to us, and then retrain it periodically. Okay, so maybe you notice we don't have our facial recognition attendance working right now, and that's due to the domain change from LDS to Church of Jesus Christ. So I apologize we didn't find that out until too late to get that up and running. So we'll have our facial recognition, which is similar to this, what I'm talking about, next month. Okay, with that, I will hand it over to the next person on the list, which I believe is Rich.
Three for three. All right. That's Moab. No, that's the original Moab, not Utah Moab. That's Egypt. So yeah, I'm going to talk about some Azure tips and tricks. I think I was originally slated to talk about Azure Front Door. I'm not going to do that today. There was a session on Azure tips and tricks. There's a guy that maintains a site. I'll give you a link at the end of this presentation that has a link to a bunch of other links, including the Azure tips and tricks site, where this and many other tips were found. I found to be really helpful. So I'm not talking about Front Door. This is me working earlier because this thing has broken on me so many times. I had to come in here and prove that it was working. That's today. That's that same, that's today's Bing image, just showing. All right, so enough with slides. Gonna do some demos. The first thing you might want to see is the Azure portal. So let's have a look at that. Here's the Azure portal. I like the dark theme. Sometimes people don't like the dark theme. You can change the theme sometimes. There we go. With a double click, you can cycle between the themes. You guys know this? Has anybody ever done this? This is new stuff to you? Doesn't work. No, that's why nobody does it. No, it does work. If you can double click like not. I don't know why it's not working. Well, now I'm in a theme that I don't like. So if you don't like that, you can just always go in here into settings and tweak it back manually, which I don't know. Do you guys like that better? I don't know. For presentations, it might not be the best, but I'm sticking with it. If you can't read it, let me know. A lot of this stuff isn't that, it's not important that you read the details anyway. Some other things is there's some hotkeys. So right now I'm in the dashboard. I can, there's some hotkeys. If you it's almost like a chord. You hit GA and it'll show you all resources. I can go back to the dashboard with GD. I can also do a search with G/. So that takes me up into the search window and I can search for something like front door. Front door, I can type. Yeah, so there's your part about Azure Front Door. Satisfied that one. Let's go back to the dashboard. Who remembers that one? GD, there we go. I can also navigate to really quick to the things that are in my favorites window. So I can say like G1, that gives me all resources, which is this guy. I can do G2, which should be, if I'm not over there, I can do G2, which should take me to resource groups. What happens if I hit G3? Any guesses? Function app, hopefully. Yay. So yeah, you get the idea there. So that's kind of a cool little tip. Let's look at some stuff in the Azure CLI. Who's played with the Azure CLI? A little bit. It's okay. If I remember how all the commands work, I think it starts with AZ, and I can do a count, something. I don't know. Help. I don't know how to do this. Oh. There. So yeah, I typed AZ account help. It's like, oh, I guess I can do a list. AZ account list. Show me this is like the subscriptions that I can see or something. But there wasn't IntelliSense. I have to, you don't get IntelliType in the CLI, but you can in Visual Studio Code. So in Visual Studio Code, there is an extension called Azure CLI Tools. You can download it. You saw the first one, right? You saw the other part, right? So Visual Studio Code, you can see these Azure. Just let me know if I'm only on my screen again. I don't mind. So in Visual Studio Code, there's an extension called Azure CLI Tools. You start with a blank file and call it something.azcli, and you can do all this stuff. So let's see if it works. Sometimes it's a little bit slow. Let me do this. Oh, there we go. Hey, look, it showed up. So there's the IntelliSense, the IntelliType. I can do AZ account. Oh, look, there's an list operation. So that's kind of cool. And it even tells me, oh, look, these are all the switches I can give to that command and what they do. I can change the output format. I can change the output format with a smaller amount of typing. Sometimes it's hard for this one to kick in, but I remember the table was in there. So that's kind of cool. Another feature of this Visual Studio Code extension is I can right-click this and run the output right there in the terminal. Did that work? Oh yeah, it did. Yay. So that's an interesting piece of kit there. Another thing you can do in Azure is you can create resources with ARM templates, and a lot of times writing an ARM template from scratch can be a real pain, so it's easier to maybe look at a resource that's already been created, and there's ways that you could get the Azure portal to show you, well, what's the ARM template that would create this resource, right? So we can do something like that. If I go to my app services, which I shouldn't have clicked, I should have hit G4, right? But yeah, I haven't really learned all that stuff yet, or muscle memoried it. So if I go to my function apps and on the platform features tab of your function app or your app services, you can see this, right? Yeah. There's a automation script. And sometimes this works. But today the cloud is sad. So when it does work, you get this giant ARM template, and you can go start trying to look at it and reverse engineering how it's supposed to work, and maybe you can get through it. But better than that, there's another extension in Visual Studio Code called the Azure Resource Manager Snippets. And what it does is it makes you, or has you, and I'll start from scratch, save a .json file. Anything.json, and you can just, if you have this extension installed, you can just start typing ARM, and it's like, well, I don't know what kind of ARM template I want. Look at all these. I'm just gonna do the default one. So there's your basic. So you just hit enter, and you get the minimum viable ARM template. So let's add a resource. Let's see what that looks like. What kind of resources can I make? Let's see if I can make an Azure function. Ooh, I can. ARM function. That's the same thing as Azure function. So let's just hit enter on that. Boom, Azure function. That's a dumb name. Let's call it Hello Engineering Forum. And that's not my server farm. My server farm is Chuck's servers. It's not, but why not? And my storage account name is Chuck's disk. So you see that as I change it here, it changes in all the places in the file, which is pretty cool. And then I could save this. Now I have an ARM template that does all these things, and I didn't have to know anything about Azure Resource Manager templates, or not that much about it. And I can also, because Terraform can call ARM templates, I can save this and have Terraform blast this out and recreate it anytime I want. So this is a really handy extension to have in your Visual Studio Code tool set. And finally, who's played with Resource Explorer or knows what that is? Has anybody looked at that in the Azure portal? Okay, so nobody? Good. I can mess it all up and nobody will really know what I did. So if I want to go to Resource Explorer, you can, if the cloud isn't sad about this as well, I can just kind of back out a little bit and go to Resource Explorer. This is also on my function app. Hit Resource Explorer, Now this is slow, but it's not Azure's fault. It's because I have about 800 billion subscriptions. But this will eventually come out and expand all the Azure resources and land on the thing that I clicked on, in spite of all these other subscriptions that are out there, which you should never have that many. That's ridiculous. So here's my Proto Sentinel, my Azure app function, and here's a REST URL to hit it. I can play around with that. This gives me the output of when I hit that URL. I can also go into actions and do all these cool things. These are the URIs that I'd use to do things like delete or apply a slot config or all the things that are unique to this particular kind of Azure resource. So I could pull this stuff in and play with it here. I could dump it into Postman and hack on it and do all that kind of stuff. Here's how I could create that thing. There's actually even documentation about all the different aspects and properties for this resource. And there's actual, if I wanted to do it and put it in a script somewhere, there's PowerShell. So those are some of the key tips from the presentation I went to. If you go to this link right there, this is being recorded, right? So go to the video, hit that link, and this has all the resources that I just talked about, and that's it for me.
Thanks, Rich.
So, how many have you heard of Blazor before? And how many have played around with it? Just a few. So it's been around for a while, but it's getting better. The tooling's getting better. It's still not production ready, but so I'm going to demo, and it's basically the getting started demo that Microsoft gives you. I haven't had a lot of time to expand it at all. Here, turn off my. I thought Windows was supposed to be smart enough to know when I'm presenting. Okay, so some prerequisites for using Blazor. You need to install the .NET 3 preview. I'm using Visual Studio 2019. I'm pretty sure that's a prerequisite too. I don't think you need the preview version, but 2019. And once you have that installed, I think I had to install an extension too. Maybe I didn't. Oh, to get the template. So I created this project on another PC. But to get the template when you want to create a new project, it's not listed by default. We'll see. We'll see if I'm lying here. You get the server side, but you don't get the client side template. So you have to install extension to get the client side template. So I'm going to demo the client side. So what this is going to do is using WebAssembly, it's going to be running your .NET C# code in the browser, which I think is pretty cool. Right? I can't keep up with all the new JavaScript frameworks, but if you can let me do C# on the browser, I'm good to go. A couple things in the startup. So if you wanted to just take a project and start using this client-side Blazor, you do install Blazor hosting and just tell it you want to use the Blazor startup. Blazor uses these Razor components. So all these are pages, but they're also components. If you look at the top here, I've got this directive saying, hey, this is a page called counter. I will spin it up and let you see what that looks like. So this represents my counter component here. And let's refresh here and I'll show you the network tab. So a couple of things it needs to download. First is this WebAssembly, where is it? Right here. It's using mono. But this is what allows your C# to run in the browser using WebAssembly. So you're going to get this, but then you're going to notice here I've got all these C# DLLs that are downloaded. So here's my counter component. So let's go take a look at it. It's just some HTML, but I've got this functions section here. If you'll notice on my on-click here, I've got this increment count, and that is this increment count right here. So every time I'm clicking, click me, it's just incrementing that count. And this is running this C# right on the browser. Debugging. So debugging has a long way to go. So there's a couple of shortcuts. If you've got your app running, Shift Alt D will open up a debugging window, but there's a couple more steps to get it working. It's going to say, hey, I'm not finding anything to debug here. Go ahead and start Chrome with this command. Super simple, right? Restarting Chrome with that command here. I'm just using the run, Windows run. And of course, because I closed my Chrome window, my debugging stopped. Still thinking. Let me try this again. Well, maybe we're not going to debug. Let me tell it not to start up a browser. The demo gods are with me, as you can tell. Okay, now I'm going to start Chrome with my nifty command. Open the debugging window. Hey, there we go. We're debugging. So let me show you how great debugging is so far, right? So here's my counter. C# over here in my debugging window. You'll see this client-side demo here. This is where you can find all of your Razor components. So I'm going to set a breakpoint here on bumping up this current count. Come over here. I'm paused. Hey, look at that. We hit a breakpoint in my C# code. Applause. So debugging is in early stages. I can't see what current count is. I don't have access to any. If you look over here, my this is undefined. I mean, so it is very limited as far as debugging goes. So I want to show you some more code really quick. There's another component here that's a survey. It really just is a link that takes you to a survey. But in this function section, I've got this property here with a parameter on it. And that allows you to call, this is probably going to look very familiar to your front-end stuff. Allows me to call this component and pass in a title, right? So here's my parameter. So if you look, this title is how's Blazor working for you. If I go over to this index page, the home page, here's that title showing up in that component. Of course, it didn't take me right to it. There it is. So that's Blazor. So this would be similar to delivering your whole app, single page app like in React or Angular, right? It's all running on the client, right? There are, of course, ways to call back, like this fetch data injects an HTTP client that calls to get some JSON, so you can still have server-side, client-side communications, right? Just like any other front-end framework. But it's just using C#. So when we should take am I over? I'm way over. There's a for each loop here that's looking for forecasts, right? Forecast is null until this comes back. So what happens under the covers is this HTTP client call gets made, JSON comes back, it populates the for each, or the forecasts, and it's smart enough to know what DOM to change, right? So it's only changing the DOM that needs to be updated if that forecast changes. Does that make sense? Similar to your front-end frameworks. I think that's all I wanted to go over. Did I mention, so I've got these pages, counter, for example. This is the URL you're going to hit this page, this component. If I wanted to, I could put this counter component anywhere else I wanted. The same way that I'm doing with survey prompt, I could put a counter here. So you can use, just because it has a page directive doesn't mean you can't also use it as a component elsewhere. But that's Blazor in a nutshell.
Okay, my time at Build was more focused on boring sessions, and almost all of them had something to do with Kubernetes. How many of you guys know about Kubernetes? Okay, how many have used Kubernetes? Okay, I'm not real experienced with it, so that's why I went to most of those sessions, but it's kind of clear to me, or it seemed to be clear to me when I was there, that Microsoft's really adopted Kubernetes as a primary technology for Azure. And that's a good thing because, well, it's a good thing in one way, is because it seems to be adopted as the primary clustering platform for all of the cloud vendors out there. And what that means is it gives us a portable platform on which to architect, and it's really a good architecting kind of platform that you can build your applications up on and then deploy to various clouds. So you don't have to be on Azure, but if you want to run on Azure, it runs exactly the same way as it would on Google's cloud or AWS or even Alibaba's got Kubernetes now. So I thought maybe I'd talk a little bit about it. I know that we're way out of time, so my presentation was short to begin with, but I'll make it even shorter. So let me pull out my notes here. I got some very important things to talk about. All right, so there were about 12 presentations that I was able to find at Build that had to do with Kubernetes. They were either directly about Kubernetes and how to use it, or they touched on it, or they showed products, other products that were built sitting on top of it. Okay, most people think or have heard that Kubernetes is an orchestrator. It's a container orchestrator. And that's what I've thought all along too. But if you actually get into it, you find out that Kubernetes is not an orchestrator. Terraform is more like an orchestrator. It's a procedural step of, hey, provision that, get that ready, put this out, start that up, whatever, and do it in these orders. Kubernetes is really more of a governor. That's why the name is Kubernetes. It means pilot or navigator or whatever. All of the components and everything built into it and all the plugins that go along with it have kind of got a ship's sort of theme. So like the package manager is called Helm. Okay, but Kubernetes is basically a governor or a controller of state for a particular cluster. Okay, so you can have your app, and it can be built on containers, and you can say, hey, I want this many of them running, I want this many containers in these pods, and I want you to just make sure it stays that way. I want you to make sure that as load demand increases on my application and my services, that you make sure it grows to fit that load, and as it tapers off, you shrink it back down. So it's basically a declarative type configuration that says, here's what I want, you go figure out how to get it done and keep it that way. If something crashes, get something started up and fill in the holes. So that's basically the purpose of Kubernetes. It's not really orchestrating, it's monitoring, it's managing, it's running tasks and jobs and that sort of thing. All right, almost out of time. So Kubernetes basically sits on top of containers. So where does it fit into an architecture? So you've got your cloud vendor, you've got platforms on which you can install containers. Then you've got the container management layer, which is like a Docker type of containers. There's other container managers out there now too, but Docker is the primary one that Kubernetes started with. It's been supported since the very beginning. That was its primary container format. So you've got the cloud platform. On top of that, you've got a container management sort of platform. On top of that, you've got Kubernetes. Okay, Kubernetes manages those containers for you. And then maybe on top of that, you've got other tools that help orchestrate things or set up external peripheral type dependencies you may have. You may need a S3 database. You may need some other things that are specific to the cloud. That's what those orchestrators are about, like Terraform. But Kubernetes doesn't deal with that kind of stuff. It's basically primarily describing the network relationship between instances of your containers so that you can set up a cluster of them and have them replicate. Quite powerful. It's definitely become the standard. And Microsoft had support for it to a certain extent using their container service, or their container service. But recently they introduced a new component to Azure, a new system to Azure called the Azure Kubernetes service. And it's basically a full-blown Kubernetes platform, certified, compliant, 100% compliant with Kubernetes standard. Okay, so that's the thing you want to focus on. Don't waste your time doing what I've done in the past, fumbling around trying to, it doesn't seem like Kubernetes completely, but. Okay, so now let's do a really quick, in the 30 seconds I got left, if I can get it to come up. Here it is. Here's a topology of the architecture of Kubernetes. Okay, you've got the Kube controller manager, Kube apps API server. You got an etcd storage system of some kind, scheduler, and then over here you got your real stuff that what your containers run in. Okay, you've got a kubelet controller, a kube proxy, which is essentially a router, and then you've got your actual VMs with your container manager installed in that. Okay, it's pretty complicated, as you can see here. And this section here is basically not really showing this, but each one of these little clusters of circles or squares are nodes in the Kubernetes system. So it's basically managing clusters of nodes. Now, nodes have agents on them that do the routing and do all of the work and communication between it and the API server. You've also got this etcd storage system, which is a consensus-based, it's like a three-phase commit type full master architecture for configuration, and that's what Kubernetes is built on. That's where all the configuration is stored for the API server, and what all the nodes talk to and their status information goes all into all of that, into that etcd repository, which is guaranteed consistent across all instances at all times. So it's quite complicated, it's quite sophisticated. All the communication goes through the API server, and then the controller manager on the top left there is basically a place where all of the agents run to manage and monitor the life of the various nodes that are running in the cluster. Inside the nodes, you can have multiple, what they call pods. Pods are essentially containers of containers. And inside your containers, you can have your actual application and its libraries and its operating system image. So it's a very, very high, thick, complicated layer around a simple container, which is where it all kind of started. So I don't know, it seems to become a standard at this point. We're going to have some wrappers or some simplifying technologies here at the church to be able to use this effectively and easily, because this is quite complex in its design and its architecture. So anyway, that's all I've got for the Kubernetes system. If you want any information or docs, Kubernetes site, if you just search for Kubernetes, you'll find kubernetes.io. They've got a good documentation section. It's got tutorials and it's got an architectural overview and all of that sort of thing. So if you want to learn it, you can learn it there.
All right, we're about out of time. The presentations that I went to was around a lot of the different compute options that they have in the cloud. I'm glad Curtis took Kubernetes, because that means I don't have to talk about Kubernetes. But Kubernetes was definitely one of the biggest things that I saw there, and I think Curtis presented that well. But for the sake of time, I'm going to jump to some of the other options that are available. Organizationally, we're trying to move higher and higher up the stack. I mean, our business isn't installing VMs; it's writing the code that helps the church move and to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. But some other options. So, and maybe I'll just give you a little peek into Kubernetes here. So you would spin up your Kubernetes clusters. They've got some really good insights. They have this concept called dev spaces, which allows you to just deploy up easily and iterate on your dev without having to worry about a lot of the infrastructure. They've got it connected into their application insights, so you can see this is kind of the cluster level of Kubernetes, but then you can go all the way down to the specific containers in there, and you can see the health of the various containers. Azure has a service called container instances, and this is a little bit higher level than Kubernetes. What this is basically is you really just deploy a Docker image in this, but you're not thinking about like the infrastructure of the platform itself. So like in this particular one, I've got a subscription. I select a resource group, and then name my container demo, whatever I want to call it, and just go through and have an image in here that would be pulled from a registry. I don't remember if I typed that in all correctly, but this is basically all you do. You have the image name, and then you just go, and it goes on its way and creates this particular Docker file would then be hosted up in the cloud. This is one that I deployed previously. Let's see if it gives the. I know it gave it. So here's like the IP. I don't have the fully qualified domain yet, but you can. It just takes just a matter of minutes, or maybe even seconds for this to come up. But well, we'll see if that one comes up in a little bit. So that's one instance is container instances. It's really simple. You just put the registry, you deploy it. One thing I do want to note is almost all of these demos that they show, and like if you're walking around in the Azure portal, almost everything they show is public facing. And so it's really easy for developers to get hooked on it. Oh, this is awesome. I can deploy this out really quick. Just be mindful of the fact that from a church's perspective, you have to be careful on just exposing everything to the internet. And so there's more. They have this concept called VNets, which you can set up to connect back into our network, which is the proper way of doing it. And so you're not just exposing all of your test lanes and everything out to the public internet. And there's a little bit more setup that's involved in that, but come talk to us if that's something that you want to do. I would just caution you to just be doing these for like production grade stuff unless you're consciously wanting to expose it externally. But another service that they have, and you can find most of these services if you just go up to the home, like most of them are just right up here. We're trying to move a little higher up than VMs, but they've got the app service. I think a lot of you maybe have already gone through the app service, but this is, if you're familiar with the Cloud Foundry style, this is really just like pushing code up, and then it takes your code and publishes it and puts it up, and it also supports Docker images. Just for the sake of time, I'm gonna also jump over. There's function apps. Has anybody deployed or messed around with function apps before? I'll just show you the simplicity of the function apps. This is basically you're not thinking about containers. You're not even thinking about your code that you're deploying. You're just really thinking about the function that's actually going to process whatever it is that you want processed. So so you can come in. You can add a new function app. You have to come up with a new domain every time, I guess. But and keep in mind this would be a public one that I'm just testing with. This isn't something that would be meant to have long term. But this would create a function app here. And now the function app is a construct that you would then put your actual functions into that function app, like the triggers. But while that's creating, I'm gonna hop over to this one right here. So you got your function app. This is my demo for ICS2 function app. Wait for it. And then you have these different triggers that you can set up. So if I wanted like an HTTP trigger, the way you would do it is just say, I want to create a new function, and then they have all these different functions that would actually these are the triggers that would cause it to get set off. There's timer, IoT, blob storage. So if someone put some file or whatever, you could do a trigger and then process that file. But like if I were to just select an HTTP trigger 2, it creates this trigger, and then so they give you some boilerplate code right here, and you can actually run a little test right here in the console, which I think this is super cool. And you got the post method, you got the output, and then you've got logs that coming down here. So I could actually change the post. If I say 321, and then I ran that again, you'd see that I've got 321 down here. And if I wanted to change it, hello world. So then I can see that over there. And the cool thing as well is I can take this same thing and I can copy this function, the link, like just to show it's not all smoke and mirrors. But I can take that and I can throw that into just like a Postman or any type of REST client, and then send the request over. And then there's my request. So that's outside of the Azure land. You're connecting it to a REST client and it's coming in. But those are some of the options on compute. So.
So as I get older, I get to learn more hobbies. Dirt biking is one of them that I picked up. And as you can see, I'm not very good at it, but learning. The other one is trying to keep up with C#. So where's this? There we go. So my mission that I served was in Sweden, and I learned the Swedish language, and it was a difficult language. There's lots of languages that we get to learn here in our field, and I just wanted to show you that one of the classes I attended that I was really interested in is C#8. It's in preview right now. I think it'll be released later this fall. And if you download Visual Studio 2019 and use that, the preview is enabled in that. But during this session that I went to, they talked about where we're at with C#, where it stands in the languages, and kind of the future, kind of what's in C#8, and then what the future looks like. So I just want to briefly go over some of this and show you that as far as the most popular programming languages, C# is hanging down there in the top 5 at least. We're in the top 10 for most loved, and then most wanted, and we're still up there, but not too far. So C# is a mature object-oriented programming language. How many of you code on a regular basis with C#? Okay, good. So I was thinking today about how to explain this quickly with the different, what they're doing with C#. And so in C#7, they introduced pattern matching, where you can take switch and if statements, and you can kind of do some branch logic inside of those. And so with C#8, they've enhanced that a lot. And so I wanted to go over just a quick, the evolution of how C# is changing. And what I'm seeing is that as you move forward with C#, especially when you get probably kids coming out of school, starting with C#7 and 8, and if you're like me, and I've been doing this for a very long time, you look and you get set in your ways. You know what a switch statement is, you know what an if statement is. You look at it, yeah, you write it, it looks like your stereotypical statements. But now with pattern matching, those are starting to change. They're starting to use more lambdas in there. And now if you get a junior guy who only knows C#7 or 8, and you start doing code reviews with them, and you're not familiar with that, your eyes are going to go cross and you're not going to know what's going on in that code. And I'm going to show you an example of that. But here's many of the new features in C#8. Read-only members, static local functions. I don't know all of these. These are the things, like I said, this is for me, this is a new hobby that I have, and it's keeping up with the changes so that when I see code that looks crazy weird, not what I'm used to, that I'll be familiar with these expressions and expression body methods that are coming around. There's just so much. So what I do to train myself is I use Quizlet, and I just go out and cut and paste from the Microsoft What's New page. This is one of their pages, and I just put those definitions in Quizlet, and then I try every day just to do a quick test, just so I can keep those fresh in my mind. As for one, as I'm looking at code, I can understand what's going on, and two, as I'm writing code, I can start introducing these new syntaxes into my code and stay up to date. So, for example, in C#7, here is a switch statement, and you notice that you have a when in here, so you're able to take a switch statement and start putting more logic into that. I won't go through exactly what this is doing, but it calculates toll per vehicle, per passenger. Then this has evolved. I mean, this probably may be new for some of you to see the when in there. In a switch, usually with switches, you just have the case return, you have your default. But now you can use, for example, you can have when in here. Then you can condense this same statement into and start accessing the case, and you can access the vehicle passengers directly. So it's kind of turned into, this is what the switch statement is evolving into. And basically, if you just look at the car statement at the top, I'm not going to go into all the details of what exactly is going on here. I'm just trying to give you just a really highlight of how it's kind of evolving. And now with C# 8, you have an expression body method, and you can tell that because you have a lambda statement on line 11. And then you start accessing. So this is the switch statement in this expression body method, and it looks like this. So if you jumped into a code review and saw this, if you were like me, I would just be like, what in the world is going on? So this is how C# is evolving. How many of you know a different language as far as served a mission or learned a different language, Spanish, whatever? Can you imagine if you had to learn a different language and every couple years they put out not only a new way of saying things, an abbreviated way of saying, instead of saying hello, you say hi, and then you say, just trying to keep up with all that. It's, especially at my age, it's starting to get a little old. Anyways, they brainstormed a lot in this session about what's coming. This is not, they're just brainstorming. They said, don't look at this as gospel, as what's coming. But I mean, they went into records and they did numeric abstractions and stack members and interfaces, and it just goes on and on and on. So the takeaway for me at Build is like, it's great to go to, but it's also a shame wagon, because you get there and go, oh, I want to learn all this stuff, and then you realize that you just don't know hardly anything, and then you have to just focus. You go away feeling like, but then you just spend a little time each day and grind the axe, so to say, sharpen the axe, and do little things that you'll be able to, especially where you're working and where your focus is, learn what's coming in that area and what improvements have been made, and just a little bit day by day, and then you won't need those glasses that keep your eyes straight. You'll be able to understand what's going on, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, so the session I wanted to share some things from was on productivity tips using Visual Studio 2019. And as I was watching the session just last night, I was trying to pick out the ones I liked the best, I could easily most demonstrate. So I just have a quick list here. So the first one I have is per monitor awareness, which basically means if you have like a really high resolution screen on your laptop and yet a low res monitor, they had a lot of reports of fuzziness when looking at Visual Studio on the low res monitor, and they apparently have fixed that. I don't know how it could exactly demonstrate that now, but it's fixed. The next one, I kind of like this one. So if you're ever looking for a setting, you know what it's called, but you just don't know where it is inside of the settings. Oh, by the way, how many people use 2019 right now? There's a lot of people. Okay, I might be preaching to the choir in this one. I'm just going to give this as is already, okay? Anyway, so a lot of you might already know about these features already. So if you're looking for, say, something about fonts, you can do a Control-Q, and then it brings you up to the top here where it has a search Visual Studio, and you can just start typing fonts, and it'll take you right to the place about the fonts in the settings. So that's a lot faster. You don't have to hunt around for things that you're looking at in the settings. This next one is really cool. This is solution filters. If you have a solution that has a lot of projects, and during the session they brought up that one of them had a solution with 186 projects, which is barbaric. Anyway, so one thing you can do, which is really cool, so you can actually unload your projects. So I'll just unload this one right here. And then you come into here to your solution file, and you can save a solution filter. And I did this earlier, so I'm just going to overwrite over the top of that one. And when I actually go to that place in my hard drive, I can actually open that up, and it'll only open up with the projects I wanted in the first place. So you don't have to open up everything. And what it looks like is really kind of cool. So here in Notepad++, you can see it still refers to the old solution file, and it specifies these are the only ones I care about. So I assume, like when you're doing an MS build, I haven't actually tested this, but actually still brings in those projects all from the original solution file. You're just only looking at a certain subset, which I thought that was super cool. All right, and it's taking forever bringing up the new project.
Question.
Yes.
If you check that in, will your other teammates, if they pull latest, will they get that file as well, and will it impact, will they see all those projects have been unloaded?
Well, yeah, I assume so, because it's this whole separate file. In fact, what was the extension on that one? It is a SNLF. So, yeah, if you chose to check that in, sure, they would see something similar.
So how do you battle, like, if you close the project that I need, and then you check that in, and then I have to open it and you check it in?
Or just not do that, just have it be a personal thing. Like, I only want to see these projects for me because this is what I work in right now. Yeah, the solution is still unmodified. This is a whole different file. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Let's see, what was next? Next on my list. Let's reload this project back again. All right. So before, if you ever wanted to edit the CS project file, you had to unload it. No longer. All you have to do is just edit your CS project file, and it just opens like that. So little thing that they changed.
You can double click it.
Oh yeah, and yes. And also I noticed that, let's see, if I close these out, if you just click on it, it brings it up over here. So you no longer have to unload, which I thought was kind of ridiculous in the first place. Okay, so the next one is a feature that I really like from ReSharper. Is actually probably the main thing I use from ReSharper. It is being able to navigate to any file that I want. In ReSharper it was Control-N, here it's Control-T. So here I'm going to just type in the word dummy, because I created a whole bunch of dummy files in all these projects over here, and list them all, tells me where they're at, and I can just select the one I want to go to. And there, I'm there. I like that because I don't remember seeing that before, and I had to use ReSharper for something like that. All right, let's see. Okay, so I'm going to debug here for this next part. So inside of a watch window, they have now given us a feature to search for things. So let's see, I've got this here, right here. Let's do locals actually, because it works in locals as well. So if I'm looking at all the things I have here in my locals window, and I just type the word int, it will highlight all the things for me that are ints. That's pretty awesome. So you don't have to hunt around for things as near as much. You don't have to go down as far as, like if you have to, you don't have to go down to objects as near as much to search for something. And you can also specify a search depth. So you can be very specific about what you're looking for and at what depth. Let's see. Let's go ahead and stop that debugger because I don't care anymore. This next one is really cool because they will now allow you to take a for each statement, and the new best friend that they wanted to have in Visual Studio 2019 was control period. It will now show you different things you can do to refactor a for each statement, for example, and it just gives you a little brief preview over here. So you can actually use var instead of, well, no, it's using explicit type instead of var. Okay. So it's trying to show me what it can do, change it to an int, but I can also convert to a link expression now. And instead also in call form as well. Or I can just convert to a for loop, and it handles all that for me. So I thought that was pretty awesome. Okay, that's a good point, because I don't know how many of you have seen this before, but I remember seeing where ReSharper would say, hey, you should really do this because I think this is better. And it would actually break the build, and it was not a good thing. So yeah, I don't know how accurate this is, how well this has been tested, but it's still pretty cool. I like that. Let's see. If statement refactoring. They demoed this where they would actually click here on the if statement, and this one right here, it'll show me what it looks like if I choose to invert it. They'll invert an if statement for me. But they also showed, and this might be preview only, because some of these features that they talked about during the session were preview only. So unless you have the preview build, you're not going to get it. I didn't get the one I was looking for, which was they would actually take the multiple parts of an if statement and break them out into multiple if statements and then nest them. So that's missing from this. Let's see. Okay. Does anybody still use regex here? Some? Okay. Let me blow this up just a little bit. One of the things that they demoed was that you can see I have a little bit of colorization going on in here. They now have a regex language support. So I saw this also during the demo, but I did not capture it. You can actually put in a comment and then specify like language equals regex, something like that, and then it would just know that the next line down, what the string on the next line is actually supposed to be a regex statement, and then it'll colorize it for you. So that's cool. Also part of something as part of preview, because I tried it here and it doesn't come up when I do control space like they said it would, is regex completion. So they'll actually help you along with your regex, because I hate looking up how to do a regex statement every time I try to do a regex. Okay, let's go back to my list. Okay. IntelliCode. This is something that it wasn't working for me when I was trying this. So this, once again, is something that will be coming hopefully pretty soon. The way we've kind of joked about it in our team is that it's the insertion of Clippy into Visual Studio, hopefully not quite as invasive. But the idea is that if you have an if statement, and so I have this unused string up here, and if I do a dot, oops, sorry, that's not a dot, that's a dot. It will show you it will show you a star next to the, say, top 5 or 6, however many options it thinks it's going to be best for you that you are going to use based on the current context. So I'm inside of an if statement, so maybe like a length. It would put length in there and put a little star next to it and say, hey, I think you're going to use this because you're inside of an if statement. And likewise for inside of instead of just logic, it would actually be part of a statement. It would tell you once again what it thinks it's going to be best for you given the context. And also, they showed how IntelliCode would also, if you had a parameter that you need to pass into a method and it was an int, it would actually list for you at the top all the ints that you previously you had access to. So it would kind of just help you along a little bit. Okay, final references. This one I thought was kind of cool. So let me go ahead and get rid of this really quick. Okay, so I have a variable here, i3, so I'm going to do final references, and I'm going to move this over so you can see. They now have this kind column that it will show you what kind of reference this is, whether it's a read or write or both. And you can actually filter those out. So if I don't want to see write, maybe. Oh, okay, there it goes. So it's looking for I thought we'd get rid of these here as well, but anyway, so that'll help you find what you're looking for. A little bit easier in final references. And let's see the last one. Oh yeah, this wasn't necessarily part of the session, but I thought it'd be interesting to mention as well. So I remember when people came back from Build last year, live share was like the hot topic, and apparently they've made a lot of improvements to it. Have any of you guys used live share? Like, do you remember how long it would take to actually connect to the session? Because I remember it being like a minute or two, something like that. And I talked to the guy at Build, and he said it's more like 5 seconds. Anyway,
they actually demonstrated it. There's a guy named C# Fritz. He's a streamer on Twitch, and he was demonstrating the advancements in this help. And he invited people on the Twitch stream to join. He sent the link out. And he got like, I don't know, 80 people connected all at the same time, typing all over the place.
Oh, I bet that was just bedlam.
Yeah, it was a little crazy. There were some methods in there that probably weren't appropriate.
No, no, definitely not. Yeah, everybody's very well behaved on Twitch, of course. All right, well, that was pretty much it.
Thanks.